I'd like to start approaching the topic of planetary magic over the next few videos, and what better way to kick that off than with an introduction to the Golden Dawn's rituals of the Hexagram. Now, the Thelemic orders also have a very similar version that's described in Liber ABA that you can find in the second book of the Equinox, and it's also in Liber ABA, Aleister Crowley's famous book 4 on magic, which some of you may already have in your possession. It's in the public domain by now, so I'll leave links to the OTO's electronic text archive in the description. Now, to be clear, this isn't a ritual that I personally use. I use the ritual of the heptagram, which we'll talk about in a later video. However, in order to fully understand the reasons why I use the heptagram rather than the hexagram, which is without a question far more popular, I think it makes sense to start here, with the original hexagram rituals, just to get an idea of what they are and what they're for. The first thing to notice about the hexagram rituals is that there are two versions, the greater ritual of the hexagram and the lesser ritual of the hexagram. Both of them have an invoking and a banishing form. And what you're likely to have noticed already is that the greater ritual of the hexagram is planetary, and the lesser ritual of the hexagram is elementary. Now, don't be fooled by their names. The lesser ritual of the hexagram is actually a little bit more involved and complicated than the greater rituals of the hexagram. So since it's simpler, let's start off with the greater, also known as the supreme, invoking or banishing ritual of the hexagram. And the first thing that you'll notice is that we're using the Earth's version of the hexagram over here. We'll come back to the lesser ritual in a moment. The first thing to notice is that there's no sun. If you look this symbol up on the internet, you'll find the sun drawn in the center. That's not quite accurate, and we'll come back to that in a few moments. First of all, how to invoke. Well, here finally we get to a point that I can agree on. The Golden Dawn suggests to start at the point of the planet which you wish to invoke and trace around it in a clockwise direction, all the way around to invoke, or in an anti-clockwise direction to banish. Then you should start at the opposite point, and if you're invoking, trace around that in a clockwise direction, and if you're banishing, trace around it in an anti-clockwise Widdershins direction. So hopefully that's very clear. If you wanted to invoke very specifically venereal entities and powers, you would start at the point of Venus and moving in a deocell direction, a clockwise direction. Describe that triangle with the point up, said by the Golden Dawn to represent fire. And then you would go to its opposite corner and trace the symbol of water, also in an invoking deocell clockwise direction. And finally you would inscribe or trace the symbol of the planet you were invoking in the center of the hexagram. And this is why I say that to suggest that the center is the sun is incorrect. The center is where you draw the symbol of the planet that you're invoking or banishing. So how do you invoke or banish the powers and entities associated with the sun? Let's bring over our primary source, the Golden Dawn, the original account of the teachings, rites and ceremonies of the Hermetic Order in its 7th edition by John Michael Greer. And you'll see over here what I was saying. For invoking Saturn, you start at the point of Saturn, you go deocell around the upright triangle, and then you go to the opposite point and go deocell around the upturned triangle. And banishing is the opposite, going Widdershins instead. And if we turn the page, we'll see the Moon, Mercury, Jupiter, Mars, and Venus. And finally here is the Sun. So let's take a closer look at the invoking and banishing hexagrams of the sun. For invoking, we start over here at the point of Saturn and complete it just as if it were an invoking hexagram of Saturn. You then create an invoking hexagram of Jupiter starting at the point of Jupiter. Next comes an invoking hexagram of Mars, followed by an invoking hexagram of Venus, an invoking hexagram of Mercury, and finally an invoking hexagram of the Moon. And all of those put together make an invoking hexagram of the sun, which in a heliocentric aeon, I suppose, makes sense. If you've got 7 traditional planets, of course, the sun was considered one of the planets, just like the moon, but only 6 points, you manage however you can. Nevertheless, just as an aside, this is one of the compromises that has let me move away from the hexagram rituals and towards the heptagram rituals, which I've told you we will talk about in a video in the very near future. Naturally, for banishing, the situation is the same, starting at Saturn and then going in the same order, right? So Jupiter next, just in a Widdershins direction. Right, you get the idea. Now, the specific instructions for using the supreme invoking or banishing ritual of the hexagram are rather vague. There's no step-by-step, do this first, do this next in the Golden Dawn documents. There are step-by-step instructions in Liber ABA from that book of the Equinox that I was telling you about, the second book in the first volume. On page 25, there's a set of instructions, but they are very, very short, very, very vague. Most of this is considerations. What if you're invoking the Caput Draconis or the Cauda Draconis, and how you'll know if you've succeeded or not. So really the instructions is just this, and a couple of lines at the very, very top here. So essentially, where to start and where to end. That's it. There's no introduction, there's no real description of where to stand or in what direction to stand or anything like that. Over in the Golden Dawn, we get a few more clues. First of all, this line over here. Now, if thou dost draw the hexagram to have by thee as a symbol, thou shalt make it in the colours already taught and upon a black ground. This to me is a clue that this can be used for creating a talisman. Yeah, draw the hexagram to have by thee as a symbol. And to me this is further confirmed over here when we read, thou shalt not trace an external circle round each hexagram itself, unless thou wishest to confine the force to one place, as in charging a symbol or talisman. In other words, don't put a circle around your hexagram unless you're creating a talisman, in which case, yes, put a circle around it so that that power, energy, stays within the talisman. But the word unless here, unless thou wishest to confine the force to one place. This word unless tells me that this isn't the only situation in which you'll use this. So here is actually just the line before, here is another sentence that gives us a little clue about what to do. In all rituals of the hexagram, as in those of the pentagram, thou shalt complete the circle of the place. Now what that exactly means is unclear, and different people have had different interpretations of that. Some people suggest that you should start the hexagram ritual with an LBRP, encircling the place of ritual. And I think I would agree with that interpretation. Other people say that the hexagram is what should be actually described in all 4 quarters, and that I actually disagree with. It's definitely what should happen with the lesser banishing ritual of the hexagram, which we'll talk about in a few moments. But if we just look over here at page 374, we read the following lines. When thou shalt invoke either the forces of one particular planet or those of them all, thou shalt turn thyself towards the quarter of the zodiac where the planet thou invokest then is. In other words, find out whereabouts in the sky right now the planet that you're invoking or banishing currently finds itself and turn yourself towards it. And then our final little clue actually comes from Liber ABA once again. In all cases, use a conjuration first with Ararita, and next with the name of the god corresponding to the planet or sign you are dealing with. Of course, however you choose to do that is probably up to you. However, if a conjuration with Ararita is something that is a little new to you and you're not sure where you would start looking for that, consider the lesser banishing ritual of the hexagram. And we read over here, when thou shalt desire to purify or consecrate any place, thou shalt perform the lesser banishing ritual of the hexagram, either in conjunction with or instead of that of the pentagram, according to the circumstances of the case. As I was saying at the beginning of the video, the lesser ritual of the hexagram is a mostly elemental ritual. And that's why it's called the lesser ritual of the hexagram. As I was saying, it's not necessarily less important and certainly not less complicated, but being elemental, it has to do with the microcosm, the lesser world, rather than the macrocosmic planetary magic of the greater or supreme ritual of the hexagram. The first thing that strikes me over here is the order of the elements: fire, earth, air, water, which has nothing to do, of course, with the order of the elements on the pentagram, other than maybe, well, going around it from the bottom right-hand point, right? Fire, earth, air, water. Fire, earth, air, water. But now we're completely disregarding the Yod-He, Vav-He order of the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, which was their reasoning for placing water above air. So let's take a look at how these four forms, which are created of double triangles, let's have a look at how they're created. In every case, we've got a triangle that does not move. It stays upright no matter the circumstances. It's the one with Saturn at the top. You can see that the other one is drawn here with little dotted lines. Well, that's because it's all over the place. It moves around that stable triangle with Saturn at the top. It's the triangle with the moon that changes, and I rather like that idea. The moon being variable. You can see that in the fire form it's at the top, and in the other three forms, earth, air, and water, it's at the bottom of its respective triangle. So fire has two upright triangles, which I suppose is appropriate for fire, since the upright triangle is the symbol for fire. Do be sure that they overlap. And then we've got earth over here, and I like that as well because we actually get all four elements represented at the same time, even though that's not actually mentioned in the text here. We have fire, water, but of course we also have air, and we have earth. So I like that earth contains all of the other elements. Then we have air, which, okay, seems pretty random to me. And then we have water, possibly like an hourglass situation. Okay, so let's turn the page and find out exactly what the steps are. Now here the thelemic orders and the Golden Dawn have wildly differing approaches. The Golden Dawn suggests to start with the Kabbalistic sign of the cross, and then a lesser ritual of the pentagram. We should use either the lotus wand or the magical sword. Obviously using the mudra of the sword is acceptable as well. Facing the east, we should start off by drawing the form of fire. Now that's very interesting to me because I thought that the east was supposed to be the direction of air in the Golden Dawn. The center of the form should be pierced, so pointing straight out through the center of it, and the divine name Ararita should be vibrated. If you're banishing, it's the same thing, just with a Widdershins direction, an anti-clockwise direction, right? Then, just as in the lesser ritual of the pentagram, you should carry the magical implement round to the south and create an earth hexagram in the south. Earth in the south? I thought earth was supposed to be in the north. Well, in the lesser ritual of the hexagram, it's in the south. Then over to the west, with a form of air, and finally water in the north. Finally, pass round again to the east so as to complete the circle of the place wherein thou standest. Then give the LUX or LVX signs and repeat the analysis of the password INRI of this grade. And it's just a couple of pages afterwards you'll find the analysis of the keyword, and this is how you perform the Golden Dawn version of the analysis of the keyword, which is a little bit different from the thelemic order's analysis of the keyword. Now, if you're going off Liber ABA, it's not actually written that this is the analysis of the keyword, but the full description is at the beginning of the lesser ritual of the hexagram. It actually starts off with everything that you need to do for that analysis of the keyword. Though it's interesting to note that this analysis of the keyword is right here at the start as well as at the end of the ritual of the pentagram in the thelemic orders, whereas in the Golden Dawn it's only at the end. Both versions recommend doing the LBRP first of all, however. Now, the analysis of the keyword is beyond the scope of this video, however you can probably get a screenshot right here. But maybe one last thing to point out is that these forms can be made to be specific to a particular planet. If we just turn the page over here, we'll be able to see that the hexagrams of Saturn, so starting at the Saturn point, of course, right, may be used in general and comparatively unimportant operations, even as the pentagrams of Earth are used in the lesser ritual of the pentagram. However, it also says that there will be 7 modes of tracing each of these 4 forms, according to the particular planet with those forces thou art working at the time. So if you were working with Jupiter, you would start specifically at the point of Jupiter in all 4 quadrants. You'll notice that with that variable triangle, Jupiter is always on the right side and Mars always on the left. It's only the Moon that goes up and down. Now, I wish I had time to go through the analysis of the keyword with you today. It might be the object of an upcoming video. There's certainly enough material there to make an entire video about. There's actually a fantastic demonstration of the lesser banishing ritual of the hexagram in its thelemic form, so bookended by Aleister Crowley's version of the analysis of the keyword, that you can check out on Wiccan TV's YouTube channel that I'll link in the description. Go check that out and like their video and subscribe if you haven't already. It's really nice. And naturally, as always, I'll also link all the books that I use and that I mentioned today too, with Amazon associate links. Now, as you can see, I have no sponsors other than my wonderful Patreon and YouTube members, so a huge thank you to all of you who make videos like this one possible. And if you're not a member and you liked what you saw today and you'd be interested in possibly supporting my channel, then really every person who joins my Patreon really makes a huge difference to my life. The links are also in the description and in the pinned comment, or if you'd prefer just to send me a one-off token of appreciation, then there's also the option of just buying me a coffee through my PayPal, or by hitting the thanks button to send a couple of dollars my way, which goes much further than you can even begin to imagine. Oh, and of course I haven't mentioned the Foolish Fish Discord, which is open to anyone who joins the Patreon or the YouTube memberships. And there are actually 2 slightly different ways of accessing that Discord depending on which platform you've chosen, that you can also find in the description. And finally, if you'd like to talk to me one-to-one, or for me to personally read your tarot, there's a link for that as well. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm really looking forward to going over the heptagram with you in the very near future. Who knows, by the time you're watching this, that video might even be out already, you know, if you're watching weeks or months or years after I made this one. So it might be worth having a look if it's there just in case. For now, I'm just going to wish you all a terrific morning, day, evening, and night. Take care of yourself and of each other, and see you very soon with another video.